Welcome back here in the old school format. Hopefully, the way that I have it right now, we can see if anybody comments. Whoa, a little too close. Anybody comments that way, I can be a little bit more on top of it when it comes to people trying to interact. I believe that the best podcast that I can do is when people are interacting. And that's because if I'm going on a rant or veer off topic and it's not something that anyone that listened to the podcast is interested into, I can kind of get back on track. And today's going to be one of those days. Again, we're trying a couple different new time slots. I believe the last couple of times that we've went live around 12 p.m. Eastern time, we've had a pretty good turnout, and pretty good turnout being, not zero people paying attention. So anything above zero is good. And like I said, I think if you're helping one person change the culture or the environment that we are in the United States today, that's a good thing. That that one person could then go on to tell another person, and so on and so on. So because I don't have the intro music in this format, we're going to go ahead and just give it a couple of minutes to see if anybody jumps on. And if, after 3 or 4 minutes, we don't get anybody to join the live, then we will carry on with what I'm wanting to talk about today. Keep in mind, I will tell you this. What we're going to be talking about today is, let me see if I can put this in a way that's easy to understand. I want to take you looking through a telescope, and I don't want to shift the telescope per se and show you something else. I want to bend the telescope in half and show you that you might not even be aware of everything that you could possibly look at with that telescope. And I think that's a good discussion to have today because when it comes to civilians, the federal government, the people that are kind of cheering on the party that is leading our government right now, and the people that are just totally against it, we only have so many concepts of what those realities are. So if you think of a Democrat, right, you think that they are for the tyrannical regime that's in office right now. But if you're a conservative, you think that the federal government is just overreaching and tyrannical, and we're not sure what exactly we need to do about that. And that's when you kind of get the fractions of viewpoints. And to be realistic, everybody's viewpoint is probably a little bit different with some nuance here and there. For instance, I know a lot of conservative people that are totally dismissive and absolutely do not trust the federal government. Yet they still believe that propping up politicians and having good people run for office in local government is the way to solve it. Well, here's the thing about that. If that's what you want to believe in, then that's absolutely your right. But you literally just bitched and moaned for the last 2 years about elections being fraudulent and that you don't trust the government. So somehow you think by getting better politicians to run for office, this is going to fix that outcome. So I will tell you this. If you think that on some large scale the federal government is not trustworthy and tampers with elections and thinks that they're not going to throw you a couple of wins to get you off the beaten trail or get you to stop tracking them, you're insane. They're absolutely, if they're already at that level where they are fucking with elections and manipulating the system, then they've already thought about how it is that they are going to manipulate the normal United States civilian. Okay, and that's the nuance that I'm talking about. You might have that viewpoint, but understand that's not the whole picture of that viewpoint. We need to start encompassing a little bit more. We need to start broadening our horizon. So, if anybody has listened to the last couple of podcasts, I've talked about Mike Glover, the CEO of Fieldcraft Survival, and how he wants to teach civilians preparedness so that they can disconnect themselves from the federal government and not be dependent on them. Now, I think that people, just like anything else, took their viewpoints and their opinion of that and went from there. Now, a lot of people have called him out and said, "Look, you're earning money from civilians to teach them this stuff, while at the same time you're saying that you need to try to hold up the federal government as long as possible." And that's kind of unproductive. You're saying prepare yourself for the end, that it's going to end at some point. And then on the other hand, you're saying, hey, we need to make sure that it doesn't end. And maybe that's just a hope for the best, wish for the worst. But they just did a interview with Mike Glover and Warbear on Instagram. And for all intensive purposes, they were just running around in circles because Warbear was asking him questions a little bit more specific than, do you want to train civilians for the end or the fall of the federal government? The answer is yes. Well, why do you want to do that? Why do you think that's so important? And then the next question would be, so why are you still promoting and help funding politicians? Because those are kind of the two opposite ends of the spectrum. And what I want you to kind of, if that doesn't make sense to you guys, long story short, what I want you to start thinking about is maybe even if it's unbeknownst to Mike Glover, him helping people become prepared for the downsize in federal government is a good thing, no matter what his reasoning is. So instead of taking our time and energy trying to dissect the reasoning, just go ahead and let him do it. Because if he's helping normal civilians get prepared for the whatever the scenario may be, this is good for us. Why is it good for us? Well, because when that happens, when we hit the restart on the federal government, when we hit that big red button, not everyone is going to be a soldier. Not everyone is going to be a shooter, and not everyone is going to be someone that is a leader. So, what do we do with the rest of the people? Well, they need to have some type of plan or be on a path to help restructure something that mimics a society. And we are so far advanced at this point that is going to be tremendously shocking. So, the more people that get into preparedness, the more people that have already taken on this mindset that they must start unplugging one outlet at a time from the federal government, the better. And now that we are not just trying to dissect the reasoning for Mike Glover getting all these people prepared, we can spend our time a little bit better. We can start doing other things with our time. And for the people that want something more than that, they will flock to somewhere obvious. They will let it be that just being is not enough, that they want to be included in more than just the aftermath of the restarting of the federal government, that they want to be an active participant and maybe pointing out the paths and the ways that we get there. and not everybody is going to be meant to do that job. And some people might actually be the warriors that we need in the restarting of the federal government. Because realistically, I believe everyone is under the thought that the federal government isn't just going to let this happen. And this brings up a very good thing that we should be looking at that maybe some of us haven't started to dissect or started to think about it in this way. The new IRS increase of agents and tremendous increase in funding. We all know about it. Now let's really start trying to figure out, why is it happening? Why do they need that kind of manpower? Why do they need that kind of financial support from the federal government? And I was listening to some things today that might put us on the right path. And he gave two examples. One example was that the regime that holds control of the federal government right now is becoming more and more resemblant of the Chinese government. Well, what is one of the big things that is a characteristic of the Chinese government that the American federal government doesn't have right at this moment? One of those things is the social credit score. Now, I don't necessarily know how much I believe that this is the reasoning behind it, but who knows? It very well could be. The reason I don't believe that this is why you see the increase in funding for the IRS is, I think we already have the social credit scoring in the United States. I think that when you have a large portion of the population in the United States that can start a social media business or help support their business on social media, and then the other half of that population cannot, and the only difference there between the two is ideology. And so we've already started to form this social credit score. If you are socially accepting what the regime of the federal government wants you to believe, you will be allotted certain things that will help promote your business or to create a business or to survive financially in the United States. And to me, it might look a little different, but for the most part, it is the same thing. It is a social credit score done in the Western way, in my opinion. Now, the other school of thought for the IRS increase in financial support is they're probably planning to do something that would make normal civilians, not the far left or the far right, but the bulk of citizens, stop paying their taxes. So you're going to need a lot more enforcement there to keep feeding the beast, to keep financially allowing the federal government to do the things that it is doing. So I want you to think about this in context, and we'll kind of get further into where I want to go with this. For a long time, there has been societies, ideologies, and governments that have tried to do socialism or communism in some form or another. And we here today have enough examples to show us that socialism and communism always has a bad outcome. And one of the things that we can take away from this conclusion is, if a government is trying to disarm their population, It is not for a good purpose. They might bundle it up and make it look pretty in the kind of veiling and covering up their full and true intent with making it look pretty and saying that it's for a good reason or it's for the safety of the civilians. But at the end of the day, it is never for the benefit of the citizen. It is always for the gaining and reach for more power from the federal government. So the majority of people in the United States today know and believe that communism, socialism, bad. Government disarming their population equals what? Bad. All right. Now I want you to think of something else that runs true with history parallel, that always happens. When you go to war with somebody, whether it be country versus country, whether it's against ideology or religion versus religion, no matter what the case scenario may be, one of the first tactics is to cut off the supply chain, to cut off the financial support for your enemy's ability to stay running the way that it has grown dependent on. This is the federal government today. So, our best course of action, if we were truly to spark a revolution that was worthy of defeating the United States government, would be what? To stop paying our taxes, to cut off the supply financially to allowing the federal government to continue running the way that it always has, the way that it has grown dependent on itself and the taxpayer, realistically. And this is what a lot of people need help bending their view. They need to know that this is also a reality. It is not just the disarming of civilians that has always rang true for a civil conflict and what might be a potentially traumatic and devastating event leading up to and or around the disarming of that population. The next thing is the government will slowly start to cut off the supplies of the people who are rebelling. And because this is a good strategy, because there are people in the civilian population that have gone to war, that know the strategies of war and the federal government, they know that whatever they are preparing to do, their counterparts are probably preparing to do as well. So, if you know you have an unhappy population in America that has gone and grown more anxious and rebellious over time, the only logical conclusion is that at some point there will be a conflict. And there are smart people in the civilian population that will look for that next step. And that next step is cutting off the financial supply to the federal government. Yada, yada, yada. I've said it 3 times now. So, wouldn't that be a pretty good reason to staff or double the staffing of the IRS? If you know, as the federal government, look, we're already trying to disarm the American population, and that American population knows that at no point in history has any federal government done that to help their population. They've only done that to kill, control, and to manipulate that population. And we're doing that. So we're trying right now to disarm the population. So there is going to be pushback. And what can they do to strike back or to hurt us? Cut off that supply of the financials. So let's take the department and the division and the federal government that is used to monitor our income, which is the IRS. So the IRS is used to monitor civilians' input into the tax system. So if they have enough people every 2 years, or it will only take 2 years for each IRS agent to audit 32 people, which isn't a lot of people. So they can audit every single person in the United States every 2 years with the amount of agents they are getting ready to have. So they will be able to keep a close eye on their income. So at the first signs that important people or influential people are conspiring to no longer pay their taxes, the IRS will already know. And with the amount of small arms and ammunition they are planning on giving the IRS, not only will they be able to monitor their income, but they will be able to prevent any disruption. So at the first sign of any kind of abnormity to their income, they will send, I got a hair stuck in my eye, they will send IRS agents to check the rebellious among our population. So let's give some examples. Just for ease of purpose, let's say Mike Glover, Donald Trump Jr., and think of your top 5 conservative commentators on YouTube. What if all 10 or so of these influencers stop paying their federal taxes all at once? The IRS is going to be able to pick that up fairly quickly. And not only are they able to pick it up fairly quickly, they will be able to pick it up and prevent any further interruption before it gets to too many people. So, with the IRS and the FBI working together, they will flag any disruption in their income. They will monitor, spy, and surveil on any kind of communication that those influencers would have to reach out to their following and say, this is what we plan on doing. This is how it's going to go down. So they can censor that communication. They can then enforce the tax collection with their new allotted small arms and ammunition, and either go to each individual pretty heavily, or kind of divide up their allotted resources to hit them all at once, which is a thing the federal government likes to do. So it'd probably go down like that. So they will go to each of these 10 influencers that are trying to get their following to stop paying federal taxes, and they will hit them, and they will hit them hard, to the point where they will make an example out of those 10. And then they will say, look, you're going to continue paying your federal taxes, or we will throw you in jail. We've already killed your dog, so you're either going to keep paying your federal taxes, or we're going to kill more of your family, and we're going to start cutting off your financial supplies. And not only that, you're going to go out to your following and you're going to tell them that they are to not stop paying their federal taxes, and they will obey the crown. Because if you don't do that, we will censor you to the point where you have no following. You see what I'm saying? So, this is why I truly believe we are seeing an increase in the IRS and the arming of the IRS the way that we're seeing it, because we know they're trying to disarm the population. Now they are going to try to maintain their lifestyles in the federal government that they have grown dependent on, no matter whether we go into a recession, depression, whatever it may be. Even if we go into World War III, the government is putting in place a system where they will drain their subjects dry to maintain their lifestyle. So if at any point their decisions are so ignorant that it begins to sink the ship being America, that they are able to kind of resource and capture all the gold and everything else off of the boat before it goes completely to the bottom of the ocean. And I think they already know that we are on this trajectory. So they know that the ship is sinking. And instead of prolonging the lives of Americans and the lifestyles of Americans, they have decided to build and fund a system that will prolong what they have grown dependent on, which is us. We are their life support. So you have to realize that. You know that disarming the American people is a bad thing. You know there is no good outcome from disarming the American people. What they just did with the IRS, there is no good outcome for. No matter what they come out and say, we know from history that anytime the government is taking more than what they need to keep running and allowing their civilians to prosper, that they are being abusive. They are doing it for horrible, devastating things to its own people. And just so you know how common this is in history, Robin Hood is a story about this. This exact thing that is getting ready to happen to the American people has been played out in a fucking Disney movie. All right? So think about that. This has happened so commonly in history that the kings and the ruling class has taken more than what they are allotted, that they made a fucking Disney movie out of it. And now we're looking around to see who is going to play Robin Hood. Well, with the amount of people that live in the United States, with the differing of ideologies amongst those people that live in that United States, it's not going to be one Robin Hood. Now, of course, it would be ideal if there was one leader, one command, but I just don't think it's going to play out like that. And so we must allow anyone and everyone that is doing any and every part to separate us from the dependence of the federal government to continue and be allowed to do what they do with a little disruption. So, Mike Glover, for example, teaching civilians to be prepared. Whether we agree with his ideology or not, he is doing a good thing to help us separate and get off the tit of the federal government. So we must continue to allow him to do that. If you don't like what he says on the internet, don't support him, but it's not worth our time and our spent energy to keep attacking and trying to dismantle what he has going on. All right, just forget about it. Let him do what he is doing because it benefits us in the long run. Now let's go to another example. The people that keep saying we must bring up better politicians, we must support better politicians and go out in numbers and vote better politicians into office, whether we agree with that sentiment or not, it is a good thing and it works towards fighting our cause. So I personally do not agree with this ideology. I do not think voting and making better politicians is going to save us. But what it might do is it might prolong the amount of time we have before all of our lives are disrupted in the United States and we are forced to be so uncomfortable we must comply. So, having a couple of good and better politicians voted into office, if we can manage to get them there that far, is a good thing because then they can make those people, their representatives, comfortable enough to where we aren't scrambling for more time for so that we have enough time to gain the resources and to put our pieces on the chessboard where we want to put them, because that is what the federal government is doing right now. They are not scrambling, they are planning for the outcome that they know is inevitable, but they are forming and putting themselves in positions to where they will have the winning side. And we need to be doing the same and having good and better politicians run for office will distract them. Having good and better politicians win elections on the local, state, federal level will buy us time. So I guess when I said that these people are just of no use to us and that we should just dismiss them, maybe was a little bit preventive. Maybe that we should give them another chance and allow them to keep doing the things that they are doing and not use too much of our time and energy to let them distract away from what we are doing. So now we have two courses of action, two pieces on the chessboard to combat the pieces from the federal government. What are those two things? Well, if you're not tracking here, we have people that are helping prepare the civilian population through a more consumable pathway that is just being prepared. And if they use things like hurricanes or natural disaster instead of scaring them off with conspiracy theories, so what? I guess it's not a big deal. We're not going to win everybody through the truth. So if they want to believe that the only reason they should be prepared and detach themselves away from the federal government is because of natural disasters, let them go down that path. They will just be less people that we have to baby and monitor constantly so they don't die when this shebang kicks off. Okay, so there's one piece of the puzzle. Civilians being prepared through other means than a civil war or federal government anarchy and just complete eruption of our governmental system. What is our next piece? Our next piece on the chessboard is people to distract and people to buy us time. And those are going to be the people that refuse to believe that politicians won't save us. These are the people that will not shut up about how we need to get better politicians to run for office and then to get them elected. Let them do their thing. They're distracting and buying us time. Now, those of us that have crossed the Rubicon, that know that this is a ship that is sinking, and at any minute now we will be submerged underwater to the point where we are out of time, where we are running out of oxygen being resources, and we are forced to do what we must do to combat the federal government. Those people, now we need to figure out and come up with a plan and help kind of undilute the conversation so we can get a clear, precise path and a way to defeating the federal government. Now, it is to be announced because this is something that will be unprecedented, that has never happened before. The overthrowing of a world power? Of course not. That has happened before, but not one as powerful as the American government. Not one who has their population so brainwashed that not only are we going to be fighting the federal government, but we are going to be fighting civilians that just absolutely do not know any better. So one of the things that we need to try and figure out while we're coming up with this game plan, this battle layout, if you will, is we need people that are uh, willing to lead, and educated enough, or not even necessarily educated enough, but intelligent enough to rebirth and help structure and form the society that will be left over from all of this mayhem. If you are going into a battle not knowing what you're planned to do with the outcome after, you have already lost that war. And there are examples of this as well. There are the Spartans at Athens. There are the January 6th protesters. When you win a battle, but you have no exit plan or plan, therefore, after, it's just going to fall apart and it will be all for nothing. So we have to start looking at people that are influential enough, can lead, are good leaders, and also have a concept of a true republic, an ideal of what America was intended to truly be. Okay. So we need to find those people and let them know that they have a job, a very important job. And it would be in our best interest that we did not put these people at the tip of the spear when it comes to fighting the federal government. Now, I know this all kinds of seems like a big conspiracy fairy tale to some people. But I promise you, the further we get into the Biden administration, the more obvious it is becoming that this is the path that the federal government has decided to go down, and us as American citizens have no choice, whether we like it or not, to be brought down with them. So we can either be destroyed by the federal government or we can be duped until it is apparently obvious that it is too late. And I think it is too late to keep running the show the way that it is being ran. But I do not think it is too late to reset and to make something in our forefathers' image. Just as we are made in God's image, we can remake this country in our forefathers' ideals and image as well. And a large part of that will be uh, installing God back into things that He has been pushed out from for a long time. And that's just one of those things where it's going to take time to get everybody to buy in. There has just been too many people that have been brainwashed that are still good people, still useful to the cause, but just have dismissed God for so long that some of their identity is made up in not something higher than their self, but just the actual disbelief in God. So that's just going to take time. Um, but yeah, I think that that is a viewpoint that we all must start looking at. It is not just going to be the Electric Boogaloo Part 2, I'm afraid. It is not just going to be glorious. I always forget that director's name. Mel Gibson. It's not going to be some glorious Mel Gibson patriot like a scene where we're storming federal agents with hatchets. As much as I would like to believe it, and there might even be some of that, that is not going to be the only image that is carried out through this revolution that is resetting the American Republic. So instead of wasting our time and energy on some of these people, some of them might even be shills, and some of them just might be uh, not aware of how much they're playing into their own fantasy. But if they're acting in a manner that is going to help us in our cause, just let them keep doing what they're doing. We'll win them over with time into the ideology that politicians won't save us. In fact, they are the army that the civilian population should be uh, fully devoted in battling and defeating, because they have proven time and time again the politician um, layout, the format for what a politician is in today's government right now is just one of those characteristics is to be overreaching, is to be tyrannical and take advantage of the American people. And that's kind of why we can't trust any of them, no matter how good of things come out of their mouth, no matter how much we would like to think their intent is good. In the end, they have all proven us wrong in some way or another. Even Trump. It's just the sad state of the American government today. All right. So, kind of think about some of those things. As much as I would like to say that the cool stuff, or what people would like to designate the cool stuff is, I don't think we have an exact game plan for that, because we don't know who those people are going to be. I would be willing to put my money on, as much as normal civilians of this ideology would not like to think that it's going to be former special forces people, or former agency guys. I have a feeling that they're going to play a bigger part than the civilian population of this mindset would like to let on. And that's just because those people have real world, in time experience when it comes to overthrowing governments, and kind of did it for the last 20, 30 years. So even if, and I absolutely do believe that the bulk of those warriors will be just your everyday civilians that are forced to be warriors. I think some of the people, or the better half of those people, are going to be ex-military that help teach and lead those civilians into battle against the federal government. And I think that the federal government is aware of this. This is why you see bills in Congress talk about veterans with PTSD, or veterans with a certain allotted kill count, or done a certain style of mission. These people shouldn't be allowed to own firearms. Well, if you don't allow them to own firearms, they can't go and teach other civilians how to use those firearms. It's going to be very difficult for them if they can find a way, right? So we need to make it as hard as possible for the people that we used all of the taxpayer money to help build up and break down, and rebirth, have something that is the complete killing machine. We need to make sure that going back into society isn't able to take the trade secrets back to the civilian population. That's why we're going to need some of those guys, because we don't have to learn by mistake. There are people that already know how to do this. There are already people who know how to kill efficiently. There are already people who know the basic outlining for throwing a local government to start capturing some of that land nav, or not land nav, but um, landscape, so that we have a little bit more to go with, so that it's not just the federal government occupying all the important land structures in the United States when this all is, you know, in full contact. Those people are going to help us kind of capture and allow us to have our own assets. I guess that's a better way to put that. I was kind of getting lost in the weeds there. I apologize. So the former SF guys, the you know your veterans, vet bro society that likes to say civilians shouldn't own certain shit or whatever their stupid ass opinion is. Unfortunately, we're going to need those guys as well. This is going to be an all hands on deck scenario. And just to prove my point, let's talk about real quick before I get off here, the FBI. Why do you think that all of what we are labeling as, kind of red flag or false flag attempts, um, mass shootings, people that seem crazy going against the federal government? Why do you think it is that the FBI is always aware beforehand of the event of the day that leads up to them people losing their life? Not that it isn't warranted in almost every situation. Well, it's because they know if they can have someone like there's probably 100,000 people on the FBI's radar right now. But if somebody makes it so obvious that they are just incompetent and that they wouldn't even be able to carry out some of these plans even if they wanted to, if those people get highlighted and make their self so apparent, the federal government is going to say, hey, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to show that this ideology is crazy, that these people are crazy. And not only that, we're going to take this opportunity just to show the normal civilian population how quickly we can end that threat. Well, of course they can. It's normally just one person, and a stupid person at that. The guy who attacked the FBI headquarters in Cincinnati this last week. Guy didn't really have it all there. But I will tell you this. What he did have is an FBI rap sheet about a mile long. They have been tracking this guy for a while until they knew that they need something to shift the narrative that the FBI was bad. They knew that they could rile this guy up, allow this guy to spit off information, and allow him to get to a point where he would actually act on the actions that he is spewing out of his keyboard to the point where they could make a big scene out of it. So it was just a win-win for the FBI. They got to make it look like the people who are against the FBI is crazy. They got to take him out, or a person that thought and is of this ideology that was so stupid and incapable of carrying out his task that nobody really got hurt in the process. And it also shifted the tide in the mainstream media. It got people from being in the thought that the federal government, the FBI, is targeting Donald Trump and they can do it to you too, and they will, and they are, to the people that think like this are absolutely nuts, and they can squash these people out with such ease that it is completely crazy to have this kind of mindset. So to think that they're not going to keep doing this, to think that the FBI isn't going to keep letting these things play out, is just really naive on our part. I promise you, the next thing that happens that turns the tide for the American public to go, I think the IRS is targeting just normal middle class American citizens. There's going to be some random guy that attacks an IRS agent, and they're just going to blow it way out of proportion. They're going to make it the headlines of every mainstream media, and they're going to use that to turn the tides back into their favor. And this is what we had in Cincinnati this last week. We had the mainstream media backed into a corner where they had nothing to prove their point, and only to go in our favor that the FBI was abusing their power, that they are unstoppable, that even Donald Trump is going to be abused and attacked at the hands of the FBI. And right when we had the bulk of the American public believing that the FBI was being abusive in their tactics, that they were being tyrannical, a guy attacks the FBI headquarters in Cincinnati. You really think that that's just a coincidence? And do you think it's a coincidence that this guy had a rap sheet with the FBI a mile fucking long? You think that was a coincidence too? Or do you think they just let him play in the sandbox until it was time to use him as a pawn to shift the narrative back in their favor? Because I promise you, that is exactly what it is, and they are going to do this 100 more times. And that's kind of why, while we are trying to convince people that this is what is actually happening, we can't spend our time and energy and our resources fighting our own. Just let them do their thing. If they want to make better politicians and buy us more time, let them do it. If they want to prepare civilians, but they don't want to start forming groups to take on the federal government, let them do it. That's just going to be one less problem we have to deal with when the time comes. And we can use all of our time, energy, and resources to trying to reach people, to try to convince people that this isn't crazy, that this is just something that is our reality today in America. All right. And I think that's about everything I wanted to talk about today. Um, like I'm trying to really drive home here. It's going to be probably until the end of the first Biden 4 years before we get enough people that it is commonplace to believe that this is the end, folks. The ship is going down, and the federal government isn't trying to save us; they're trying to save theirself. And until then, we're just going to have to do what we can do. And fortunately, the federal government's not making it that hard to convince people that the ship is going down and that they're saving themselves, not the American people. And so before they use an FBI false flag to change the narrative there, let's go out and let's get a couple more people that are those on the fence mindsets, those mainstream conservative, kind of more so libertarian, kind of all over the place political ideology people. Let's get them to accept the fact that the federal government is not on our side. Well, we need to make a plan. All right. And with that, stay prepared, stay safe. I love you guys. God bless America first. Peace, y'all.